If I see a founder that basically gives me that spiel without being absolutely obsessed about what he or she is building, I won't go, I won't invest. For the simple reason that building a startup is so fucking hard. It is excruciating. So if you're going there with the head, being like a rational opportunity as like a consultant, as soon as it's gonna get super, super hard and you're gonna wanna stop, you're gonna stop. That's the thing that I don't want, is to back people who only think that this is like a great opportunity rationally and don't understand that this is like an emotional decision, over the next 10 years.
Hello and welcome to Polyweb. I'm your host, Sara Landi Tortoli, and my guest today is Hugo Amsellem, founder and general partner at IntuitionVC, an early stage fund dedicated to startups in the consumer and culture space across Europe and the US. In this conversation, we cover his experience in advising hundreds of startups and why he thinks that the consumer space is finally back after years of focus on the B2B space.
The way you win as a founder against giants is by having a shitload of soul in the game, by caring so much that it hurts, which is not something that you can do if you are at Facebook or Google. And the second thing is
So, I thought we can start this podcast today with a contrarian take, if you want. You have a background as a startup founder, and now you recently transitioned into the venture capital space. You're actually general partner at IntuitionVC, and you've made with this venture capital the specific choice to invest in consumer product. And you kind of believe that after years of B2B dominance, the consumer space is finally back. So I wonder why this choice of really focusing on just the consumer space.
yeah, I mean, first, I'm like a newly VC. It's something new for me. I still don't identify as a VC, but it's a transition that is starting to happen. Basically, so we invest in consumer at large. We don't invest in consumer product necessarily, but like more like the consumer tech and all things. What we say is consumer and culture. I think the point starts here is that I don't like the word consumer, right? So we say, hey, we invest in consumer, but I don't like the word consumer because it's not about consumption. It's about culture, and culture is what happens when you impact people at scales, when you impact millions of people. And so for me, the starting point of wanting to do something around consumer was essentially the fact that empirically in my whole life, I've always been obsessed with people trying to change the way other people behave, right? Hopefully positively, but that's generally the case with founders. And so the reason why we think that consumer is essentially going back is just a few reasons, I would say, that are like happening right now, like in 2024. The first thing I would say is obviously a cultural shift, right? So we say consumer and culture, but you gotta start with the culture in general. And so the culture right now is essentially that you have like a new generation coming to age, the generation that everybody's talking about all the time, which is Gen Z. And Gen Z is obviously the first sort of like digital native generation, and so they behave in ways that we've never seen before. They're entrepreneurial, they're resilient, they're non-conformist. They're essentially having like a whole new set of values that are at the same time are different, but also at the same time are like super, super, super dispersed. You don't have like a monolithic block of cultural behavior in Gen Z. It's like an archipel of a lot of different subcultures that are interacting with one another. And so this basically changes a lot of stuff because they have new behaviors, new organizational form, and we think that essentially they're going to want new platform and new places to hang out. And that's, I think, the first sort of like cultural shift that starting to happen really, like, since like a couple of years, and is accelerating now. The second thing, obviously, we're in tech, we're building around technological shift, and Obviously, right now, the big shift is around AI. And for me, like I think about AI as, because everybody has thoughts about AI, and not a lot of people know what they're talking about. And I don't know what I'm talking about AI, right? Like I'm not technical. So I look at AI in a bit of a different way, where I'm trying to understand like what's really different this time. And so for me, I think, and I have to write an article about this just because I don't know yet what I think, and if I write about it, I will actually understand what I know, what I mean. And so for me, AI is the real Web3. A lot of people are talking about Web3 as read, write. I think it's fine, but I think the real Web3 is AI, because it's not read, write, own. It's access, distribute, and create. And what I mean by that is that essentially Web 1 was not about reading. It was mostly about access. You could access information where before you couldn't, right? So you could read blogs of super expert people that basically you didn't have access to before. You could, of course, access a lot of the information around Wikipedia and all the information that was legacy information that you couldn't freely access before. So Web 1 was about accessing information. Web 2 essentially was about distribution, not right. And when I say distribution, is essentially when you get a lot of information, online. Basically, it starts to aggregate into networks, and networks are inherently democratizing in distribution, and that's what happens with essentially like social media. Anyone could go viral, anyone could distribute content, and distribution became commoditized. And now what we have with Web 3 is that now creation is democratized. Now creation is a commodity. And so what happened is that you have like access, distribution, and creation, and the whole information flywheel now is getting locked, and it's starting to spin faster and faster and faster and faster. And what happens is that essentially now, because anyone can access, distribute, and create, you basically have a consumer sort of like a renaissance, because not only consumers are essentially like having like a 10x in output, input, whatever, anything, but also what happens is that any individual can freely scale themselves, and can become either like a small business, a big business, a creator, a freelancer, a prosumer. So what's really happening now is that when you're targeting consumers as a fund, when you're investing in companies building for consumer, those companies are also building for prosumers, for freelancers, for entrepreneurs, etc. So it's not just about consumer. Like you still essentially as a founder talk as a consumer founder. You build as a consumer founder, but you have a new upside, which is targeting those new individuals that can scale themselves. And so that makes consumer investment a new category that is a bit bigger than it used to be, right? Because it's a bit of a hybrid of a lot of things right now. But what's really fun is that even if even consumer being a bit more broad now, the founders building in the space still have the same sort of like crazy delusion about building for millions of people, right? And so you have, and I think that's what we're building. You have a great opportunity right now to build a fund for those crazy people that generally are feeling a bit lonely, especially for all those years, where it was all about B2B, it was all about, like that type of entrepreneurship. And now those founders, they start to get a bit of light again, they start to get a bit of fire again. And we just want to be the one, like that basically focus on them and believe in them. That's basically the whole pitch of Intuition, making consumer founders less lonely, and a bit more, like in the light.
I love the way you think about this, especially the access, distribute, and create. The way I see it is that before AI, the consumer tech market was completely saturated, meaning all that could have been possibly invented with current technologies was basically already there, and the big mover captured already the entire market share. And therefore, it was extremely difficult for any new consumer tech to really emerge. And maybe like it can happen once every generation, because there is the cultural aspect that you were talking about, I think, like Gen Z are like being very different from early Facebook users, right? So,
Yep.
but that happens once in a generation, let's say. And now instead with AI, all of a sudden, there are things that are technologically possible that were not possible before. And for existing companies, that the companies that dominates the market in that particular space, is very, very difficult to adapt, because it's difficult to kill the cash cow, the thing that made you money until then. And it's also, when you're a big company and you have many teams, many people working with you, it's very difficult to align everyone and bring about the change quickly.
No,
So,
it's super difficult for companies to do it. Like, and it's always like a question that people are asking themselves, and we don't really know the answer yet. We just have like some hypothesis. Of course, every VC will tell you like this is a platform shift. AI is a platform shift. New platforms are going to be created, and everybody's going to move from one platform to another. So we want to be funding the new platforms. I think it's possible, but I don't really know if it's going to happen. Right? If you look at Google and you look at Perplexity, Perplexity should have been built by Google, right? Search with AI, new sort of like user interface, a new conversational form, multimodal, blah blah. Yeah, sure, it should have been built by Google, but it's built by Perplexity. So now you think, okay, maybe it's going to happen in every category, and then every new media, every new sort of like vertical is going to be AI-ified by a new company. But at the same time, we don't know. You could argue that most of the mobile sort of like platform shift that happened was captured by the incumbents as well, right? Like, Google nailed mobile. Facebook was not a mobile first company, but they nailed mobile. They acquired, they just, but at the end, like that, they're winning. So I think it's between the two. I just feel that right now, and that's why we love consumer. Right now, the incumbents, like those big companies, etc., they're essentially a bit sort of like stumbling. They're struggling because it's they're getting a lot of the hate from the users that are a bit tired of the way things have been done since then, and they're also getting a lot of hate from the regulators,
mm,
right? So that's always what I say, when defensibility is not just about like data and distribution, what we usually say, it's like, oh, data and distribution is everything. It's true, but it's also about love and trust. And you need, as a company, to understand how to get love at the beginning from like a small niche of user that then is going to obviously scale. And I think this is what happens with those new AI first experiences that are yet to be built. We don't know yet how those experiences are going to be delightful, are going to be incredible. But those experiences, those new interactions are going to get a lot of love from your users. And so that's why I think building in consumer in the AI age is interesting, because even if OpenAI is a consumer first company in the sense where they're building like like the experience with their app, etc., I think that they are sort of like focusing on the core building blocks of AI that are potentially sort of like possible to understand, to forecast. Oh, we start with this, then we go with that. But then, because it's impossible to understand what consumer wants, I think they're gonna let people build the apps that are gonna discover the new delightful interactions or the new delightful experiences for consumers, right? So I think it's counterintuitive, but in the AI age, it's better to invest in consumer because the incumbents cannot understand what the consumer are gonna want, versus actually building in sort of like the infrastructure bits, because that's what the big guys are gonna go first, and they're probably gonna nail it.
very interesting. I'm curious to know, what do you think are the biggest opportunities for emerging startups in the consumer space at this point? You were talking about the inability, sort of the incumbent, to really understand what users want. So, how can emerging startups that are interested in this space capture and understand this type of interest?
There's a generic answer to that. Be like, and I can put like the VC hat, right? Be like, I've seen like like a market, blah blah. I've seen like an opportunity here and there. But in the end, like the question is how founders will win against giants. And if you want sort of to have like a metaphor, how David is winning against Goliath, that's the question that you're asking. The way you win as a founder against giants is by having a shitload of soul in the game, by caring so much that it hurts, which is not something that you can do if you are at Facebook or Google or even OpenAI, although like you can argue that they have a lot of soul in the game as well. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that you have to put your energy into something so specific that it's gonna just enter a vulnerable place in the other side, and that's how you're gonna win. And if you think about Goliath against David, it's exactly that. Like Goliath has like an immense amount of power. It's a giant, right? But he doesn't really care. Where David has amazing soul in the game, big sort of like big love for his people, blah blah. It's like all of those things. But also like the way he wins is by basically like like I don't know how you said that in English by the way, but like shooting this stone with this tool, which is amazing leverage. You put a lot of force, and it's like a small stone, and it goes into this specific place. And so I think in the end, that's essentially how founders are winning, and that's basically the people we wanna back all the time. Is by being super super focused, obsessed about something with a super super specific direction. And so that's why we see, like I can give you like the answer of like we're looking at a lot like at the creativity tech, anything that enables creativity, anything that enables now also companionship, because AI enables companionship experiences in any app, right? So they have to understand where the user wanna actually interact with an AI so they feel less alone, and this AI basically enables then a multiplayer game, blah blah. I can give you all that spiel, but if I see a founder that basically gives me that spiel without the obsession, without being absolutely obsessed about what he or she is building, I won't go. I won't invest. For the simple reason that building a startup is so fucking hard. It is excruciating. So if you're going there with the head, being like a rational opportunity as like a consultant, as soon as it's gonna get super super hard and you're gonna want to stop, you're gonna stop. So I that's the thing that I don't want, is to back people who only think that this is like a great opportunity rationally, and don't understand that this is like an emotional decision over the next 10 years, and this is really different.
Yeah, and yet there are founders that build very successful companies more intellectually, let's say, less emotionally. Like I don't think anyone wakes up and is super passionate about doing, I don't know, an HR payroll software, right? And yet and
No,
yet there
but
and
yes.
yet there are, like amazingly successful companies, and the founders maybe were not so
Mm.
passionate about it, but they are successful.
So you're right, but what happens is that, and I've seen that over and over again, founders some founders will start anything because they just are in love with doing,
Mm.
and they just want to do in whatever direction they will do. But most founders that are in the space where you're like, oh, it's like, how can you fall in love with HR tech, they actually fall in love with the topic afterwards, because they love doing, and so they will fall in love with HR, and they will tell you, HR this that, like I'm empowering people to win more time and build more stuff and everything. So it's true, like B2C founders have like a deep sort of like a priori love for the topic that they're building for. And I think that's how you redefine new experiences, new especially when there's like a culture shift. And then you have like those founders that are falling in love a posteriori, where they starting and then they just fall in love with what they do. But generally, if you're if you're building a company and it's so hard, you have at some point to reorganize your brain around the topic, and they will fall in love with anything, right? And then you have maybe a third category of people, which are absolutely, amazing as well, which are people, and it's always like a combination of the three, right? Which are the people that are falling in love with winning. They just love to win, and those founders are amazing as well because they can do anything, right? They love winning, so they will end up winning because that's what they want.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen these, as well. Like I've seen I have friends that like founded startup, and they were more passionate about being founders than the topic per se. But then over
Yeah.
time, as the startup became successful and they started hiring and forming the team, they became passionate about that. They became passionate about their business,
Yeah.
per se. So yeah, it's definitely possible. Okay, but we talk about what's important, what important qualities you're looking for in startups in this particular space. I wonder, uh, aside from really being obsessed and caring about these, are there any other aspects or qualities that you think are important? Like, I don't know, particular metrics that are a key indicator that there is something there, or conversely, like red flags.
It's a tricky question. We're investing mostly at pre-seed and seed, mostly in consumer and culture. And so essentially, when you do both, right, which is like early stage and consumer, which is like highly volatile, you got to have a lot of intuition, and that's why we named the fund Intuition. There's no way you can rationalize like a pre-seed investment in that space. You can for sure have convictions about the market, about the need, about the direction, about what's enabling this potential huge opportunity, and we do have a lot of convictions about a lot of those topics. Mostly because I'm obsessed with how people behave individually, but also collectively. Like I think about this all the time, right? So when I meet a founder that is telling me like, oh, I think that people are going to behave, in the future massively in this way, and I'm starting now because this shift is starting. I can build conviction. I can talk about that a lot, right? But overall, this intuition, sort of like that you build around founders, around almost like a human future human behavior, is essentially for me broken down in three categories all the time. It's mostly about the founder and not about the market. Is one, I'm looking for passion. And again, like you mentioned, you can be passionate about building companies, you can be passionate about winning, but I still want to find a passion. I want to see fire in their eyes in some way or another. That's also the way I behave myself, so I will connect with them better. It's like sometimes, founder like doesn't, like us. They're like, you know what, I don't like you that much. So and we're like, yeah, you shouldn't go with us. But usually, like I like founders with passion, not only because it gets me on board, but because that's usually what gets other people on board, whether they're investors, employees, journalists, whatever, right? Like it's just that's something that's really important. The second thing that I'm looking for is clarity of vision, because you you can get like all the passion you want, you can get all, but if you're not able to convey your delusional vision in a clear articulated way, then people are not going to join you. We're like, I don't know, yeah, it seems really like it's super passionate, but I just don't know where it's going, right? So like I want to see that clarity of vision. And what people sometimes mistake is that when we talk about clarity of vision, it doesn't have to be something that is static. It's something that is dynamic, right? What I mean by that is that when you talk to great founders, they have like amazing clarity of vision. They're like, okay, we're gonna do this like this, that, and 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. And you meet them a couple of weeks later, and they're like, wow, it's totally different now. They're like, yeah, we're gonna do Z, Y, X, 3, 4, 10, but they still have the same clarity of vision anytime you're talking to them, even if this vision changes often, which is intended in the early stage of a startup. And the third thing is deep insights. That's the thing that like I'm dying for. I have especially around consumer. That's why we're building something around consumer and culture, because we've thought about this a lot, my co-founder and I. We've been obsessed with these things. And so when I meet founders that have discovered something deep about something, how people behave, etc., I'm I'm essentially being like nurtured, like I'm always hungry for that type of insights. And generally great companies are founded on some weird but super profound insights that a lot of the people around are not agreeing with, right? And I'm not going to give you like super insightful example around that, but like even Airbnb, like at the beginning of Airbnb, you're like, you know what, people would want to sleep on people mattresses, that's like one deep insight. Okay, sure, that's cool. But what was the real deep insight that was counterintuitive at the time was like, it was 2009, 10, where like the financial crisis was happening. And the real deep insight was like, fuck, people need to make money. That's it. And so it's super counterintuitive because it's not romantic. It's a bit like almost predatory. We're gonna take the opportunity so people actually can. But still, it's an insight that when acted upon becomes an unstoppable machine to create the future. And that's the thing that really matters. And so yeah, it's passion, deep insights, and then clarity of vision. And when you have that, generally when you have that, bah, it's difficult to say no, to be frank.
Aha, interesting. Mm. For deep insights, it's difficult to quantify or put a number into that because most VC will tell you that they need to see traction. And this sort of drives me kind of uh, crazy in a way because what does traction mean
It
exactly, right? No, I ask this question
doesn't
every
exist.
time and no one is really able to answer me. Okay, traction is growth, but like is there a number? Is there a
No,
benchmark? Like what is that?
it depends. If you like an investor is investing at like series A, is like, or is a growth investor, obviously, then you can say like, I want traction, right? But generally, when an investor says he wants to see traction, it means he turned into a VC. If I say to a founder, how I need to see traction, it will mean I became a VC. And when I say became a VC, it's not a good thing. I'm an investor, but I'm not yet a VC. And I'm fighting against myself all day, every day to not turn into a VC. And again, you understand the difference, right? Like you have good VCs and bad VCs. What I probably say is like I'm turning into a bad VC. Why I'm saying that is because when you're an investor, and we're starting to see it right now with my co-founder, you get bombarded with pitches. You get bombarded with people like raising money. And so it's really easy to dissociate yourself from the founders approaching you and start creating like almost like a protection, which is frankly, like understandable. It's really hard to build empathy all day, every day. You got to have like a super high empathetic muscle, right? Like you're seeing founders that are putting their whole life onto one thing. And for you, a VC, it's going to be one deal. And just the fact that you say like it's a deal, it's something quite relevant, like quite sort of like a revelatory. It's not a deal, it's the life of people, where they're putting everything on the line. And so why I'm saying that is essentially that when you say like, hey, I need to see traction, it's because as an investor, you're trying to essentially decouple the emotional aspect with the rational aspect, and you're essentially putting like a rational answer to an emotional feeling that you have. So the short answer is, when an investor says, like when an investor that is supposed to invest at pre-seed or seed say, oh, it's too early, or oh, there's not enough traction, what it really means is, I didn't build enough of a conviction on you as a founder to fall in love and take an irrational bet on you and be like, you know what, take my money, I believe in you. That's what it means. And if I say that, that's probably what it means. So what I say, and maybe it's going to change, but right now what I say to founders is essentially, again, like pre-seed, seed, sort of like early stuff. It's like I couldn't build enough of a conviction. That's it. And what I mean by enough of a conviction, it's either about you as a founder. It's usually 90, 80% you as a founder, or maybe about the market. Sometimes it's like, like I like you a lot, but like, dude, I just cannot buy this direction. And to be frank, it always goes back to the founder then, because you have like a list of like a guy like puts up a list of the pivots of consumer companies, or like of pivots of big companies that started with something and that ended up being successful with another thing. And 80% of those companies are consumer
Mm.
companies. And so ultimately, even if a founder goes into like a crazy market that you don't believe in, if it's an amazingly good founder and you are right about that founder, it's gonna change. He or she are gonna change the direction of the company quickly, super quickly. So never say there's no traction if you're a seed or pre-seed investor. Just say, yeah, sorry, I didn't fall in love.
I think this is very honest. It's also kind of like harsh.
It's difficult to hear that it's personal, right? Because you can say like it's not personal in the way that I say it, but it's about you as a founder, right? Like, oh, you didn't convey enough sort of, I don't know, like enough fire or something. There's something you didn't convey, so then I'm not gonna take the bet on you, right? And it's mostly about that. So yeah, I don't know. And there's like another thing as well. It's like some investors, and I think it's amazing if they do that already, will essentially write down all the reasons why they didn't invest, and it's rational reasons, right? So, oh, I think the market, the market, and I think it's great because you can, as an investor, you meet a lot of founders, and sometimes you start to get insights about like a certain market, and you're like, oh, if I saw that, maybe I would be excited, blah blah. But ultimately, if they absolutely loved the founder, they would invest and would say that as well, right? They would be like, oh, I think this, that, but I still invest, but I still think you should look at it this way, etc. So I think in the ranking of how we investors should behave is one, always answer. And sometimes I don't do it, right? Like sometimes I forget to answer like a LinkedIn message, but I try to like answer as much as possible, even if it's just like, hey, couldn't build a conviction. Because right now, when you're a founder, like, and you get ghosted by VCs, it's horrible, especially when they started answering you first, right? But like, oh yeah, let me talk about, and then like they stopped answering. It's really bad. They should really always say no. Two is potentially give like a rational answer. Be like, oh, this is what I'm missing from like the market or like the opportunity. And three, what's best, I think, it's to give like an honest emotional answer of like, yeah, I just couldn't build enough conviction, mostly on you, mostly on the team, a bit on the market as well. But like, yeah, that's my honest answer.
Mm, okay. I'm sure many founders are gonna be delighted with this. But yeah,
I don't know.
that's the reality, right? That a lot of them experience every day, especially the ghosting part. Let's get more tactical if you want. Because you right now, of course, as a VC or as an investor, but also
I'm gonna have to say I'm a VC because I am a VC, but still, you got the
I got the
you got the stuff.
distinction very very clearly,
Yeah,
and
and the struggle.
and a struggle, yes. But also before, because you were a co-founder of the family, if I'm not mistaken,
No, I'm not co-founder. I was part of like the
the
super super
team.
early
Okay.
team that got equity. But no, the co-founders are three people that are now fighting with each other. But it's Nicola and Usama, and I cannot thank them enough for having taken a bet on me when I was super young and super crazy. I'm still am less young, still crazy.
That's how we like it. You basically worked with so many startups, and you keep seeing so many startups. If you were to condense all these years of learnings that you got through the interactions with founders and startups, what would you advise or what would you convey to founders or even aspiring founders that are starting a business?
I don't. I've probably met with thousands of founders of even teams. Thousands of teams, and the only thing that sort of like I would be able to sort of like condense as learnings will not be for founders. If you're a founder, you shouldn't listen to me. Because I was a founder before, but it was like 2011, 12. So like it's been a long time. It's been more than 12 years now, right? So if you're a founder, don't listen to me. Like I don't have anything relevant to say to you as to how to build your company, right? If you're an investor, then maybe I can teach you something because I've seen so many founders on the other side of the fence, right? I was on the other side. So if you're an investor, maybe I can teach you a thing or two. And again, those things are always gonna come back to like if as an investor you have empathy and you're good with people, which is my case. So you can only take advice from me as a certain type of investor, then just follow your gut. That's the only thing there is to say. Because for me, for like more than 15 years, having mostly talked with founders all day long, my guts are not wrong. They're generally right. And of course, you can always get lucky, and that's great, or you can always get unlucky, and that's unfortunate. But overall, you're gonna get it right long term if you follow your gut, and you're gonna be, more importantly, you're not gonna always second guess your decisions if you stick to your gut, right? Because if you're trying to find a rational framework to assess founders early stage, at some point it's going to change. At some point you're going to like always like challenge your framework, etc., and you need like a rational way to decide as well. I'm not saying it's all gut, all everything, but in the end, if I should really really summarize, it's like follow your gut. Just it's gonna pay off at some point. And what's interesting about the gut is that, and it's intuition all the time, it's that all the rational thinking that you do trying to understand this, at some point it's also going to change your gut feeling little by little, right? So like intuition is essentially all of those rules, those rational rules with experiences that are getting condensed into feelings, because feelings are way faster to process than like rational thinking, right? So if you build enough empathy, if you always have this focus on people from a confident place, you're always going to learn rationally new things that are then going to be summarized by your intuition. So in the end, just follow your gut, because it's the condensed rationalization of your experience for the past 15 years, that are going to be into this. So yeah, that's it. I have only one thing to say for investors or in the earlier
Do
stage.
you do you recall an example in which like your gut told you big time, yes, this is it? And could you, thinking back to that examples, like maybe like through, I don't know how long ago did that happen, but like over time, were you able to isolate the elements that made your gut say, oh yes, that's that's it?
It's a good question. It's a good question, Amika. I've had founders where just I fell in love, and I would have not like I would have almost like joined them in their journey, because it was so exciting. And when you meet those people, especially when you meet those people, and then so because you can have like those intuition in like one call of 30 minutes, sure, but then you need to actually double down and spend more time with them, right, to actually really really develop that deep intuition. It's difficult to post rationalize. One example that I have is a founder of a company called Jow, which is like a doing like a grocery shopping in like a content first way, right? So amazing new sort of like experience as to like do grocery shopping and cooking at home. And I just loved it. I loved it. The guy was calm, confident, meticulous about his approach, absolutely obsessed about customer experience, about product, right? Like with a big P, with a capital P. And was in the execution so flawless, right? Just like this sort of like natural force. And that's one of the way that I fell in love. But at the same time, I had another founder that I met, which is the founder of a company called Beehive, which is like a company that's Substack. And I had 30 minutes with him. And the guy was essentially bombarding me with one super, super cool insights about like, what actually matters. But also like conveyed like an amazing sort of like bulldozer energy, right? Meaning like, yeah, I have a vision for this, but more than anything, what I have is an amazingly brutal execution capability, and I'm gonna crush everything. And so those two examples, are like based on a different type of intuition. So if I try to like sort of post rationalize it and I say, oh, like a founder needs amazing calm confidence and amazing product focus, then I'm going to invest in all companies like Joe all the time, but I'm going to miss companies like Beehive. But then if I look at companies like Beehive and I'm like, yeah, you need to like have like sort of like brutal founders that are just like reckless executors, like almost like dumb executors, like boom, 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 boom. Of course, it's brilliant, but like it was this force that then I'm going to miss companies like Joe. So I think like it's really, really, really like super important not to post rationalize everything, because post rationalization of successes can actually lead to future failures. So you have to stay humble and to be like, you know what, I don't know why I'm not gonna try to just, yeah, I feel like it.
Okay, interesting answer. One of the, I think, biggest struggles of consumer tech products is getting adoptions, right? Even at the very early stage, like finding your first users, and then having like a number that is meaningful enough. I'm not going to use the word traction, but that is meaningful enough to at least have some relevance, right? To showcase, hey, this deep insight that you were talking about, you don't get the deep insights unless you have some numbers behind it. You can't just get it like by talking with five people. It's very
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah,
So how, in your experience, maybe if you have any advice, how would you approach this type of problem? Because I've built consumer products before, and this is always kind of the most difficult part, even if beforehand you do a lot of due diligence, meaning a lot of customer discovery. But then when you actually
yeah,
go and try to launch something, even like an MVP, I'm not talking like the final version of the product, I'm talking like a
yeah,
testing thing. It's very, very difficult to isolate the who, getting those people on board, and then getting those deep insights.
yeah, for sure. Like, and again, you have to be humble all the time, but like specifically when there's a really good reason to be humble. And so for me to start saying, as a founder, you should A, B, C. Yeah, but what did I build? Like, big company? No, I didn't. A successful consumer product? No, I didn't. So what I can do instead is redirecting founders to people who gave advices from an actual place of building and successful building, right? So now it's becoming memes, and it's great, that startup stuff are producing memes. And it's two things, it's do things that don't scale, read the Paul Graham article, that's it. Don't spend more time listening to anything that I say about that, just go read that article. And two, the other YC sort of mantra, which is build product, talk to your users, that's it. That's the only thing you should do. And having built companies but failed at it, but also having followed successful journeys from like the sidelines, but like super close to founders. Every time that founders are not doing enough or one or the other, they regret it, even in like a matter of weeks. They're like, fuck, I should have talked to more users. That's like a go to pitch competition, fuck, should have talked to more users. Start working on a PR campaign, fuck, I should have talked to more users. Start sort of, fundraising and talking to VCs before it's actually needed. Fuck, should have built more product, right? Should have been building instead. So it's always this sort of like test where, you should do either or at any given time. And that's pretty much it. So go read Paul Graham's article, go look at what, Y Combinator actually puts out as knowledge, because it's 10x more interesting than any other thing you can be reading right now as a founder. Because now content, we see like creation of content is a commodity now. So, people are going to spin content all the time. So just find those places where content is great. And that's generally like the places that I just mentioned. So I won't talk much more about founder advice. Again, I can give advice to investors. That's what I do.
Okay, maybe we can give.
No, but the last thing probably, and that's something I can do, is when you're a founder and you're building in consumer, it's so much more easy to build for
Mhm.
yourself. And that's why I'm in consumer and I like consumer, is because I'm a human and consumer products are for humans. So because I have a huge amount of empathy, and also I think so much about how people behave, anthropology, sociology, all of those things. Yes, if you're a founder and you're building for yourself, it's so much more easy because you don't need to study other people. You just need to study you. So of course it's like a cheat code. And of course, when you have people on board as a startup founder, like me, like as investors, and I dare you to find someone that is as obsessed as I am in tech with how people behave. I dare you. I'm obsessed with this thing. I just talk about this all the time. I think about this all the time. Like I'm observing all the time, reading all the time. So yeah, surround yourself with people that are as obsessed as understanding, like a human behavior as you are as a founder, because it's your users.
I have a question for you because in your analysis early on, you mentioned that this is the real Web three, right? The Web three phase in this case is the creation phase more than the own
Yeah.
phase. And in this phase, the creation itself that gets commoditized. So if the creation gets commoditized, by definition, it becomes widely accessible to everyone. But then, if that's true, where does the value accrue? Meaning, even if you manage to build something that is successful, but creation is so easy, what's stopping others to replicate, like effortlessly, basically, what you're doing, especially as AI advance and like creating software becomes ever easier?
I get it. To be frank, so what happened when Web 1 arrived? Like anyone could learn anything because you could access to information. That just raised the bar, right? So like now you cannot just be successful because you have access to information. It's like, oh yeah, like I know things. Yeah, and everybody can learn. So the bar is raised, but also the it becomes like a level playing field, right? We're like just like anyone can learn now. So like if you're a kid in I don't know in South America, or you're like a kid at Harvard, you can have access to the same amount of information. Of course, success is not just about accessing information, but at least you can have access to the same information. With Web two, what happened is about distribution. So anyone could distribute, right? So then you saw stars, meaning like celebrities coming from anywhere. Before, a celebrity was part of a process of like a hyper selection where someone could say, you become a star, right? I'm going to sign you at Universal Music. I'm going to give you access to the general public. I'm going to make you like a TV star, like a movie star. You can now, like the one of the most recognizable faces are just creators, right? Kabilame, like the guy that does like this on TikToks, like it's like an African, like this, how you say, like African descent guy, like that is born in Italy, and that becomes like like the World War star that we know. So now with creation, what's gonna happen is the same. So it's creation of information, it's creation of content. So of course, code is content. So you could argue that consequently, creation of code is going to get commoditized, which is true, but it's going to raise the bar, right? So now, like anyone is going to be able to build, anyone is going to be able to create content, and anyone is going to be able to create content that is engaging, right? So when distribution was commoditized, and you have like, and you're like a hot girl or hot guy on Instagram, and you do videos, of course you're going to get more distribution, or at least like you have a bigger chance of getting this distribution. But now, because creation of video is soon going to get commoditized, then like a fat guy in Arkansas is going to be able to create content that is as appealing as a hot girl in Los Angeles. And that's just, again, a level playing field. But in the end, what's going to happen is just like always, competition is going to go up and specialization is also going to go up. You're going to find niches of content, of code, of anything that are going to be so focused that it's going to be weird. And that's what happened with content as well, right? So that's essentially what happens with porn. At the beginning of porn, like in the 80s or whatever, it was just porn, right? It's just like whatever, like people fucking. Then the internet happens and people are going from I watch porn to I watch whatever, like super specific BDSM stuff, and then people are getting into the niches and it's like, oh wow, I've discovered kink, But now like kinks are happening for everything, not just porn, right? Think about a content like ASMR or like miniature cooking. People are like basically cooking super small eggs into super small dishes with super small things. This content happened because distribution was a commodity and that you could basically find your audience for that. So now it's just going to be this at scale, super niches that are going to potentially become also empires, right? Like a great new content empire can come from any niches with people that are creating from anywhere because, they just have access to the global market with the same tools, with the same leverage. And basically, like as consumers, as individuals, we're benefiting from that because we're getting bombarded with a supply of super specific content made for us and super specific products made for us and super specific software made for us that is also enabling us to produce more, et cetera, et cetera. So it's this thing where I was talking about this flywheel, access, distribution, creation. Now it's spinning. Now it's like the whole thing has been locked together. Now it's spinning and God knows where it's going to lead us, like this sort of like Pandora, like the Pandora box of the internet has entered its final opening up stage, in a way. And some people think it's scary, some people think it's exciting. I think it's a bit of both, but
Isn't that
what's
isn't that
happened.
kind of overwhelming as a VC also? Because if all of these create abundance of creation is all of a sudden unlocked, like the Pandora box, you open it and then all sorts of things comes out. Then it becomes very, very difficult also to evaluate opportunities and distinguish
Yeah,
noise from how do you say
yeah,
noise from signal?
signal. No, but you're right. Yeah, so I think for investors, yes, and that's what you have to fight against, right? It's called FOMO generally, and FOMO manifests in a lot of different ways. But as an investor, it manifests itself in a very, very, very specific way, which is a message from another investor saying, "Have you seen this deal?" Right? And so that's the message. You're like, "Fuck," And so you have to fight against that, right? Like you have to fight against like, okay, like chasing all of those things. So for sure, for investors, more people are creating in more ways ever thought possible. And so you have to always like, but in the end, if you again continue to only mostly focus on the people don't change, right? So, you still back the same type of amazing people. So it's not that complicated, I would say, as a VC. It's not that overwhelming. As a founder, though, especially as a consumer founder, every time you open Twitter and you see like the next fucking company that you never heard of that just gets millions of likes and millions of dollars from VCs, and you're like, fuck, it's this is difficult. This is much more difficult than like doing suffering from FOMO as a VC. And so that's why I think consumer founders or founders building for millions, which basically can happen to anyone now, right? So, oh fuck, this guy gets like the millions of downloads on this app and I didn't, blah blah, all those things. As a consumer founder, you need to at the same time surround yourself with other consumer founders because they understand the struggle, but also like don't spend too much time comparing yourself to other founders, especially the other consumer founders, that got successful like for one day or like for, like the whole life, whatever. But this is much more tough. This FOMO, this overwhelming aspect of missed opportunity, of, opportunity cost. It's much more tough on founders because they have an infinite sort of like choice of building in infinite directions, where we as investors, we have a finite number of startups, even if it's growing, to look at and to choose from, right?
I have one last question for you. And this is a bookmark that I made from the very first answer, actually, that you gave. So we are going a little bit back. That's how my brain work. Like I put like asterisk
Okay.
and bookmarks and then I go back. When you were talking about consumer and culture and the relationship between the two, you say that it's about culture because it's about changing the behavior of the people, hopefully in a positive way. And in your newsletter, you wrote this post about loneliness, economy, and how technology can help fix that. And that article had really a huge impact on me. I found it extremely useful. So I wonder if, for listeners, you could maybe briefly summarize what was that about, and maybe specify more how really we can perhaps bring behavioral change for the good through technology.
So it all boils down to, and I'm going to make it hopefully like a short answer, and I'm not really good at short answers, but like, as you understand. But for me, so culture meets technology. For me, it means two things, and it's the two obsessions that I've had for 15 years. And it's sort of like two counteracting forces, or like two forces, like yin and yang, of the internet meets technology, essentially, of the technology meets culture, or internet meets culture. On one side, technology enables any individual to have infinite leverage and basically gives almost like total independence to individuals, right? So when you think about like a creator, was always the it's the most leveraged individual in history, creator, right? So like, you give a creator a phone, and he or she builds a media empire. That same media empires doing billions of views, millions of euro of revenues, etc. That same media empires before required hundreds of people that were codependent from each other. One broadcast, one creation, one this, one that, blah blah. Now you have one person, and then this person creates this media empire by itself. What happens is that, as someone who benefited from that, as a creator myself, right? Like, I have a newsletter, I celebrate this, and I find this fascinating. And that's called the creator economy, right? And I got obsessed with this. I built a crowdfunding platform for musicians so they can do everything by themselves without the labels. I helped video creators basically build their own, like media empires without the permission from the old traditional gatekeepers and etc. So I'm celebrating this. But this, at the same time, on the other end, when individuals, creators, but also us, anyone, don't need anyone else but themselves, then they're lonely. And so internet enables individuality at scale, but at the same time makes us a little bit lonely. And so for me, the argument that I have is that technology follows ideology. So, and again, you could argue that it's not really true, but I want to take this sort of counterintuitive point to develop my thinking. If technology follows ideology, then when the ideology is about making us sovereign individuals, making us independent individuals, the American dream, I can do it by myself, blah, blah, me against the world, then we got the technology that we got, right? And it's amazing. It's great. Like, I'm so happy I push a button, there is an Uber coming, or there is like food coming. I'm super happy. But now what's happening is that the ideology is shifting a little bit. And because we've pushed this a bit too far, or we've reached the limit, or we've unbalanced it a little bit, now the ideology changes, and you're like, oh, wow, actually, being independent doesn't mean happiness. And we collectively are starting to realize that we need to be part of something greater than ourselves. We need to forget about ourselves as well again. And so I believe that naturally, if ideology changes, if vibe changes, if culture changes, then technology will follow and will give us the tools to actually connect with one another using technology itself. And so that's why I was writing about mostly two things, and I'm mostly thinking about two things. And that's why I'm saying like I'm obsessed with how people behave as individuals, but also as a collective and the relationship between the two. Is that I'm obsessed about the creator stuff. I'm obsessed about individuals scaling themselves, but I'm also obsessed with people being part of something greater than themselves, which is almost like two counteracting forces that I think when they stop fighting with one another, it becomes like a more like harmonious relationship. And I think that's what we're here for, that we're here to build this harmonious future in between the individual and the collective so we can live, as two things in peace
Yeah.
almost.
And indeed, like things are changing, right? Like the ideology, I think, is shifting. I think we can see that
Big time.
already with this abundance of open source, even in AI. That's something that like even 10 years ago would never ever have happened. And I think that this is because of a change in the way people think and what we think is acceptable and not acceptable anymore.
I think 100%. I think also like COVID was the peak of independence because we were stuck at home and we realized like dude, like we're stuck at home but it's fine, like we don't need anyone, right? Like we just watch Netflix to entertain ourselves, we order food, we order Amazon, stuff like that. Like I'm at home, I can work from home, I can do from home, I can do whatever the fuck I want by myself. And because it was the peak of that, then we realized also like fuck, like, but it doesn't make me happy, quite the contrary. So then you had like a whole generation, maybe like a whole generation, just like a whole cohort, which is the whole world. Why it's like a quite big cohort, but like with like a whole cohort of people who experienced that feeling at the same time and then came back to the world and be like, oh, now I'm gonna connect with people again because I can go out, I can meet people. And they were like, but I have no one to meet. Like I'm fucking lonely. I'm not lonely because I cannot meet people during the lockdown, right? Like I'm lonely because I don't have anyone to meet. And that sort of like realization, that was like a massive collective realization in a synchronous way, enabled that sort of like cultural shift that we're now looking, right? Like I've been talking about loneliness for like more than 15 years. I tried building an app trying to help people be less lonely by connecting, like in real life, etc. In 2013, I realized that at that time it was absolutely not the right moment, right? Like people just wanted to fuck and they were like, okay, is it a dating app? No, I'm out. Now the amount of articles, of tweets, of videos, of companies building around the word loneliness is incredible, right? And it just happens because like it's the right moment. So now like we're building this stuff, we're building the tools. And so for me it's super exciting because I think it's of course an amazing economical opportunity because people are just, they need that. But I also think like wow, like it's just gonna make us more happy, it's gonna make us more balanced, because it's not just about happiness, it's just about balance or imbalance. But still, you're gonna be able to like be a creator and be like fuck, I don't need anyone, I'm doing my stuff all by myself and I don't need anyone's permission, it's amazing, I'm rebel, like I don't need to comply, status quo, fuck it. But at the same time when we're like, oh, now like who do I connect with? And boom, I'm gonna be able to connect with my crowd, like automatic dinners created so then I can join and belong, all of those things. It's a great balance, I think.
Ugo, we are at the end of this interview. I know that you are going on tour. In fact, you were just in Berlin
Yep.
recently for this tour. So maybe you can give listeners a bit of background and where they can find you.
Yeah, 100%. You go on intuition.vc. Yes, it's .vc. I am a VC. Intuition.vc, you'll find the tour, you'll find the date. It's basically super simple. If you're a founder building in consumer with high ambitions, we select 50, 60 of you, just a few VCs, not too many, just VCs that are obsessed with consumer. And we're going to make it like a 90-10 ratio. and it's happening in 7 cities around Europe and US: Paris, Berlin, London, Stockholm in Europe, San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles in the US. And yeah, it's gonna be fun.
We will leave all the links as well as the tour dates in the description and in the show notes. Hugo, thank you so much for being here. It was a super
Thank you.
insightful and fun conversation.
That was fun. That was fun indeed.
Thank you. And for listeners, see you on the next episode. Bye. That's all from today's episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you find this episode valuable, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel or to the Polyweb podcast on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. It would be fantastic if you could leave us a rating, a review, or a comment, as this really helps other listeners find the show. All the resources mentioned in this episode will be linked in the description and in the show notes. See you on the next episode. And if you cannot wait until next week, you can watch this episode right here that relates to some of the things that we talk about in this episode. Bye.